I'm Amanda, 32, and until last month, I was the family doormat. During our annual reunion, my father punched me square in the face in front of 39 relatives when I finally stood up for myself. The worst part, my mother laughed while my brother Justin clapped, saying, "Serves you right." They never suspected that the quiet daughter they'd pushed around for decades had the power to destroy everything they valued. That night, I made 3 phone calls that changed our family forever. Before I continue my story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe if you haven't already. Growing up in Fairfield, Connecticut, I always felt like I was living in the shadow of expectations I could never meet. Our 5-bedroom colonial house with its manicured lawn and white picket fence looked picture-perfect from the outside, but inside those walls I learned early that my value was tied to how well I could please my father, Richard. Dad built his financial services company from scratch, turning it into a regional powerhouse with over 300 employees. His success in business, however, came with a temperament that made our home feel like walking through a minefield. One wrong step, one comment that displeased him, and the explosion would follow. His anger was legendary among family members, though carefully hidden from business associates and friends. "A Gordon never shows weakness," he would remind us at dinner. "A Gordon commands respect." But respect in our household was a one-way street. Dad demanded it absolutely while giving none in return, especially to me. My mother, Catherine, played her role as the perfect suburban housewife with practiced precision. Her blonde hair was always styled, her clothes impeccable, and her smile ready for company. Behind closed doors, though, she was my father's most loyal enabler. "Your father works so hard for this family," she would say whenever I cried after one of his tirades. "The least you can do is not upset him. You know how he gets." Then there was my brother Justin, 3 years older and the undisputed golden child. He followed our father into business, joining his company straight out of college. While I struggled for a single word of praise, Justin received constant affirmation. "That's my boy," Dad would say, clapping Justin on the back after he shared even the most basic accomplishment. "You've got the Gordon business sense." My academic achievements never earned similar recognition. When I graduated with honors from Northwestern with a double major in finance and economics, my father simply nodded and said, "Let's hope you can actually do something with that." I remember sitting in my dorm room after that comment, staring at my diploma and wondering why I still tried so hard to earn his approval. Yet, some desperate part of me never stopped seeking it. Despite the dismissal of my educational accomplishments, I built a solid career as a financial analyst. Each firm I worked for was more prestigious than the last as I climbed the ladder through talent and determination rather than family connections. Still, at our mandatory Sunday dinners, my professional accomplishments were treated as cute diversions until I would settle down with the right man. "Amanda's playing at being a businesswoman," my mother would tell her friends at charity events I was obligated to attend. "But she'll find the right man eventually. She's just a late bloomer." These comments stung, especially as I moved into more senior positions that demanded 60-hour work weeks and complete commitment. My relationships suffered under the weight of my career and my family's disapproval. My last boyfriend, Thomas, ended things after 6 months when I canceled our weekend getaway to help my mother plan a garden party. "You'll never prioritize anyone over your family," he said as he packed his things. "And the sad thing is, they don't even appreciate it." He was right, of course. I maintained my distance physically by living in the city, but emotionally, I remained tethered to their approval. Every achievement was measured by whether it might finally earn my father's respect. Every promotion was an opportunity to prove my worth. 2 months ago, everything changed. I was offered a senior position at Blackwood Financial, one of the most prestigious firms in the country. The salary was double what I had been making, the team exceptional, and the opportunity exactly what I had worked toward for a decade. What made it even more significant was that Blackwood was known for their ethical standards and transparent practices, something I valued deeply. There was just one complication. Blackwood occasionally competed with my father's firm for certain clients. Nothing directly adversarial, but enough overlap that I knew he might see it as a betrayal. Still, after weeks of consideration, I accepted the position. For once, I chose my career over potential family fallout. As our annual family reunion approached, I decided this would be the moment I would finally share my news. Perhaps I thought naively the achievement would be significant enough that even my father would have to acknowledge my success. With 40 family members as witnesses, surely he would offer at least token congratulations. How completely catastrophically wrong I was. The day of the reunion arrived with perfect early summer weather. Pulling into my parents' circular driveway, I saw the collection of luxury cars already lining the entrance. I straightened my navy blue dress, applied a fresh coat of lipstick, and reminded myself that I was a successful professional about to become even more so. This knowledge would be my armor. My mother opened the door before I could knock her critical gaze, immediately sweeping over me from head to toe. "Amanda dear, you finally made it. Everyone's already here." She air-kissed near my cheeks, careful not to smudge her makeup. "That dress is a bit formal for a family gathering, isn't it? And you look thin. Are you eating properly?" Before I could answer, she was already turning away, calling out to my Aunt Patricia about the new caterer she had hired. Some things never changed. I made my way through the house, stopping to greet relatives I hadn't seen since the previous year. Uncle Robert and Aunt Jean asked about my job, seeming genuinely interested until Justin appeared, sliding his arm around my shoulders with false camaraderie. "Little sister is still playing with spreadsheets," he announced with a chuckle that diminished my entire career to a child's game. Meanwhile, I just closed the Henderson account. 7 figures potential for 8 next year. "That's wonderful," Justin, Aunt Jean said, immediately shifting her attention to him. "Your father must be so proud." I extracted myself from his grip and moved toward the back patio where my father held court. He was telling one of his business war stories to a captive audience of male relatives, tumbler of scotch in hand. When he saw me, he gave a brief nod before continuing his story without pause. Throughout the afternoon, small moments of dismissal accumulated like paper cuts. When I mentioned a financial strategy I had developed for a client, my mother interrupted to ask if I had found anyone special yet. When I helped in the kitchen, my aunt wondered aloud why such a pretty girl was still single at her age. When I joined a conversation about market trends, Justin talked over me until I fell silent. The worst moment came when I overheard my parents in the kitchen as I was returning from the bathroom. "Amanda looks tired," my mother said. "All work and no personal life is aging her." "If she had Justin's business sense, maybe the work would be worth it," my father replied. "But she's always been soft, too concerned with ethics and feelings rather than results. That's why she'll never make it to the top." I froze in the hallway, their words hitting harder than they knew. After 13 years building my career, I was about to reach a pinnacle they couldn't even comprehend, and still they saw me as the family disappointment. At 4:30 in the afternoon, my mother announced that dinner would be served at 6 o'clock sharp in the formal dining room. As relatives dispersed to freshen up, I retreated to my old bedroom, now converted to a guest room with no trace of my childhood visible. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I stared at my reflection in the vanity mirror. The face that looked back was that of an accomplished woman, not the insecure girl who had left this house. I had earned my success through intelligence and hard work. Why was I still seeking validation from people who had never supported me? Something shifted inside me then. I would make my announcement at dinner not for their approval, but as a declaration of independence. I was done diminishing myself to soothe their egos. When I came downstairs, the formal dining room had been transformed. The massive mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier, set with my mother's best china and crystal. Place cards positioned family members according to my mother's complex social hierarchy. Mine was near the far end between my mother's second cousin and an elderly great-aunt with hearing loss. My father sat at the head of the table naturally. Justin at his right hand, my mother at his left. The inner circle of power in the Gordon family had never been subtle. As servers brought out, the first course conversations bubbled around the table. Aunt Patricia's daughter was expecting her second child. Cousin William had purchased a vacation home in the Hamptons. Uncle David's son had been accepted to Princeton. I ate my soup silently, waiting for the right moment. It came during the main course, a brief lull in conversation, as people focused on cutting their perfectly cooked steaks. "I have some news I'd like to share," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the table. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward me with varying degrees of interest. "I've accepted a new position," I continued, straightening my shoulders. "Senior financial strategist at Blackwood Financial." There was a moment of impressed silence before my father's fork clattered against his plate. "Blackwood," he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "My competitor." "They're not a direct competitor, Dad," I clarified. "There's some overlap in services, but different client bases and approaches." "Different approaches, indeed," he said, his face flushing. "They undercut established firms with flashy promises and progressive nonsense. Actually, they're known for ethical practices and transparency," I corrected before I could stop myself. "Their client retention rate is the highest in the industry because they deliver consistent results without hidden fees or accounting tricks." The table fell silent. No one ever contradicted Richard Gordon, especially not at his own dinner table, and absolutely never his own daughter. "What exactly are you implying about my business practices?" he asked, his voice dropping to the quiet tone that had always preceded his worst outbursts. I should have backed down. For 32 years that had been my role in the family, but sitting there surrounded by relatives who had witnessed my systematic diminishment year after year, something inside me refused to retreat. "I'm not implying anything about your business, Dad. I'm telling you about mine. About an opportunity I've earned through hard work and talent, not family connections. For once in my life, I'd appreciate if you could just say congratulations." The silence that followed my statement seemed to stretch into infinity. I could hear the gentle clink of ice in water glasses and the distant ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. My father's face progressed through shades of red as he processed my words. "Congratulations," he finally said, his voice deceptively soft. "You want congratulations for betraying your family, for taking everything I taught you, and using it to benefit my competitors." "This isn't about you," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "This is about my career, my future. Blackwood is offering me an opportunity to work with their top clients and help shape company strategy." While using inside knowledge of my business practices, he countered, voice rising. "Knowledge you've gathered sitting at this very table." Several relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My cousin Eliza studied her plate with sudden interest, while Uncle Robert pretended to adjust his tie. "That's ridiculous," I said. "I've never used any information inappropriately. I'm a professional with my own expertise and reputation." My mother placed her hand on my father's arm in a gesture meant to calm him, but her words poured gasoline on the fire. "Richard, perhaps Amanda didn't think this through properly. She's always been impulsive about career moves. I'm sure she can call them tomorrow and decline." "I'm not declining anything," I stated firmly. "I've signed the contract. I start in 2 weeks." Justin laughed, the sound brittle and condescending. Classic Amanda, always thinking she knows better than everyone else. "Dad's built a business for 30 years, but sure, you know more about the industry than he does." I never said that, I responded, my frustration mounting. "This isn't about comparing our knowledge, this is about my right to pursue my own career path." "Your career path?" My father's voice boomed across the table. "You wouldn't have a career if I hadn't paid for that fancy education of yours. Everything you know you learned because of me, because of this family." "I worked my way through graduate school," I corrected him, "and I've repaid every penny of my undergraduate loans. My career is mine, built through my own efforts." "How dare you," he thundered, slamming his fist on the table hard enough to make the crystal water glasses jump. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. By becoming a corporate traitor." The familiar accusations were designed to make me cower, to apologize and retreat as I always had before. But something had fundamentally changed inside me. I was no longer the insecure daughter desperate for approval. I was a finance professional who had earned her success. This is exactly why I never tell you about my achievements, I said, my voice strengthening. You can't stand that I've succeeded on my own merits, that I don't need your approval or your connections, that I've built something for myself that has nothing to do with the Gordon name. My mother gasped. Amanda, apologize to your father immediately. For what? For having an independent thought. For building my own career. For refusing to pretend I'm less than I am to protect his ego. My father pushed back his chair so forcefully it toppled backward, crashing to the floor. The sound echoed through the dining room as he stood, fists clenched at his sides. You ungrateful little bitch, he snarled, using a word I'd never heard him say before. You think you've accomplished anything without the Gordon name behind you. You're nothing without this family. Richard, my Aunt Patricia, exclaimed, shocked at his language. But he was beyond hearing rage, transforming his familiar features into something monstrous. He stalked around the table toward me as relatives shrank back in their chairs. I stood my ground, refusing to cower. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval. Nothing was ever good enough. No accomplishment ever mattered. I'm done diminishing myself to soothe your ego. He reached me before anyone could intervene, though in retrospect no one tried. What happened next occurred so quickly that many relatives later claimed they didn't see it clearly. My father's right hand swung in a wide arc, his fist connecting with my left cheekbone with enough force to knock me sideways into the wall. Pain exploded across my face as I tasted blood from where my teeth had cut the inside of my cheek. The dining room erupted in gasps and exclamations. Through the ringing in my ears and the shock of pain, I heard something that cut deeper than the physical blow. Laughter. My mother's high, nervous laugh that she always used in uncomfortable social situations. Richard, really, she said, as if he'd simply used the wrong fork rather than assaulted their daughter. Not at dinner. Then Justin's voice, clear and satisfied. Serves you right, maybe that will knock some sense into you. I straightened slowly, one hand against my throbbing cheek, and looked around the table. 39 faces stared back, with expressions ranging from shock to discomfort to morbid fascination. Not one person stood up. Not one relative moved to help me or confront my father. Blood dripped from my split lip onto my mother's pristine white tablecloth. The perfect metaphor for our family appearance of perfection stained by violence just beneath the surface. Without a word, I turned and walked steadily from the dining room through the kitchen and out the side door to my car. No one called after me. No one followed to check if I was okay. As I drove away from the house, I glanced in the rearview mirror. My left cheek was already swelling, a dark red mark blooming where my father's knuckles had connected with my face. The physical pain was nothing compared to the final shattering of the illusion that my family might someday value me. I drove in a state of shock muscle memory, guiding me to a hotel 20 miles from my parents' house. At the reception desk, I kept my injured side turned away, speaking quickly about needing a room for the night. The clerk, busy with a phone call, barely looked up as he processed my credit card and handed me a key card. Once inside the anonymous hotel room, I stood before the bathroom mirror and fully assessed the damage. My left cheek was swollen, a darkening bruise spreading across my cheekbone. My lower lip was split at the corner, dried blood crusting along the edge. I looked like a victim, and the realization filled me with a combination of shame and rage. For 32 years, I had been the family peacekeeper. The one who smoothed over conflicts, who accepted criticism without complaint, who diminished her own achievements to avoid threatening fragile male egos. And my reward, a punch in the face in front of the entire extended family, followed by laughter and mockery. I checked my phone. No calls. No messages. Not from my mother asking if I was safe. Not from any of the 39 relatives who had witnessed my father's violence. Not even from Aunt Jean, who had always slipped me sympathetic looks during family gatherings. The absence of concern spoke volumes. This was the family dynamic laid bare I was not worth checking on. My physical and emotional safety were irrelevant compared to maintaining the fiction of Gordon family perfection. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed ice pack pressed to my face and allowed myself to remember moments I had spent years suppressing. Age 7 crying because I'd earned the highest math score in my class, but my father was too busy praising Justin's soccer goal to look at my test paper. Age 12 overhearing my mother tell her friend that while Justin had inherited the Gordon business sense, I would hopefully at least find a successful husband. Age 16 winning a prestigious economics competition only to have my father question whether the judges had lowered their standards for girls. Age 22 bringing home my first serious boyfriend to have my father spend the entire dinner interrogating him about his career prospects while my mother critiqued my cooking appearance and conversational skills. Age 27 being passed over for promotion at my first financial firm only to discover that my father had called the managing director to suggest I wasn't ready for additional responsibility. The pattern was clear, consistent, and would never change unless I forced it to change. I opened my laptop and logged into my secure work server. As part of my due diligence before accepting the Blackwood position, I had researched potential conflicts of interest. What I discovered about my father's business practices had shocked me, but family loyalty had prevented me from acting on the information. His firm had engaged in multiple instances of questionable billing tax strategies that skirted legality and in at least 3 cases outright misrepresentation of investment performance to clients. Nothing that would necessarily trigger automatic regulatory action, but definitely practices that would destroy client trust and company reputation if exposed. I had saved the documentation telling myself it was professional thoroughness rather than potential leverage. Now, staring at the files, I realized I had always known on some level that this moment might come. The moment when family loyalty would clash irreconcilably with personal integrity. My father had built his success partly through intimidation and fear. Employees who questioned practices were fired and blacklisted in the industry. Clients who complained were threatened with expensive legal battles. Family members who challenged his authority were humiliated and ostracized. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider using the power I had quietly accumulated. I had built my own professional reputation, established connections throughout the financial industry, and compiled evidence of my father's business improprieties. I had the means to hold him accountable not just for decades of emotional abuse, but for professional misconduct as well. The ethical implications weren't simple. Exposing my father would affect innocent employees at his firm. It would devastate my mother's social standing, the only currency she truly valued. It would destroy Justin's inheritance and future. It would splinter the extended family into factions. But allowing the abuse to continue unchallenged would destroy me. I had spent my entire life trying to earn love and respect from people, incapable of giving either. The physical assault had merely made visible the violence that had always existed beneath the surface of our relationship. As midnight approached, I made 3 separate lists: people who could help me, potential consequences of action versus inaction, and what I hoped to achieve beyond simple revenge. By 1 a.m, my decision was made. There were 3 phone calls I needed to make. 3 conversations that would set unstoppable forces in motion. 3 connections who could help me ensure that Richard Gordon would face consequences for his actions, both personal and professional. I set my phone on the nightstand and slept deeply, for the first time in years, the decision bringing unexpected peace. Tomorrow would change everything, but tonight I could rest, knowing I had finally chosen myself over family obligation. I woke early the next morning, my face throbbing but my mind clear. The hotel room was silent except for the distant hum of the air conditioning. I checked my phone again, still no messages from family. Their silence confirmed I was making the right decision. After showering and carefully applying concealer to the worst of the bruising, I sat at the small desk by the window and prepared to make the first call. The contact was saved in my phone simply as Michael C. Michael Chen was a senior investigator with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Division, someone I had met 3 years ago during an industry compliance conference. We had stayed in touch professionally, occasionally meeting for coffee to discuss regulatory changes. I dialed his direct number and he answered on the third ring. "Amanda, this is unexpected. How are you?" His voice was warm but professional. "I've been better," I replied honestly. "Michael, I need to speak with you about something sensitive. Do you have time today for a meeting?" There was a brief pause. "Of course. Is this a professional matter or personal?" "Both," I said. "I have documentation of what I believe are serious financial improprieties at Gordon Financial Services." Another pause, longer this time. "Your father's company?" "Yes." "This is a significant step, Amanda. Are you certain you want to proceed?" "I am. What happened recently has made it impossible for me to remain silent." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near his office at 11. Before ending the call, Michael added, "Document everything about your current situation. Take photographs. Write down exactly what occurred. This may become relevant." I followed his advice, using my phone to photograph my injuries from multiple angles, then writing a detailed account of the previous evening's events. The clinical process of documentation helped create emotional distance from the trauma. At precisely 11, I sat across from Michael in a quiet corner of the coffee shop. He winced visibly when he saw my face, the concealer unable to completely hide the bruising. "I think we should start with what happened to you," he said quietly. I gave him a concise account of the family dinner, my father's violent reaction to my new job, and the disturbing responses from my mother and brother. As I spoke, Michael took notes, his expression becoming increasingly grave. "Have you filed a police report?" "Not yet. That's part of my second call today." He nodded. "Now about the financial documentation you mentioned." I opened my laptop and showed him the files I had compiled, evidence of client fee manipulation tax documents with questionable deductions, emails discussing how to circumvent reporting requirements, and spreadsheets showing disparities between actual returns and what was reported to clients. Michael reviewed everything carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. After nearly an hour, he closed the laptop and looked at me directly. "This is more than enough to open a formal investigation. Some of these practices cross the line from aggressive accounting to potential fraud. You understand what this will mean for your father and his firm?" "I do." "And you're prepared to provide formal testimony if necessary?" "Yes. I can't continue to be complicit through my silence." Michael gathered his things. "I'll need copies of everything. My team will begin investigating immediately, but these cases take time. You should be prepared for potential backlash once your father is notified of the investigation." "I understand. Thank you, Michael." As we parted, he touched my arm gently. "Take care of yourself, Amanda. What you're doing takes extraordinary courage." My second call was to Diana Winters, a family law attorney known for handling high-profile domestic violence cases. Her office was located in a converted Victorian house downtown, the interior warm and designed to put clients at ease. Diana listened without interruption as I explained the situation, including the history of emotional abuse and the culminating physical assault. When I finished, she leaned forward, her expression compassionate but determined. "We need to file for an immediate restraining order," she said. "With your visible injuries and potentially multiple witnesses, we have grounds for emergency protection." "Will that be enough?" I asked. "My father has significant resources and connections." "We'll also file criminal assault charges," she explained. "The restraining order is just the beginning. We'll need to document every interaction, every attempt at contact, and build a comprehensive case." "My family will close ranks," I warned her. "They'll deny what happened or minimize it." "That's common in families with long-established patterns of abuse," Diana acknowledged. "But your injuries tell their own story. And sometimes once one person speaks up, others find the courage to do the same." We spent the next 2 hours completing paperwork, Diana photographing my injuries for legal documentation and preparing the restraining order application. By the time I left her office, the wheels of legal action were in motion. "The sheriff will serve the restraining order within 24 hours, Diana explained as we concluded. "Your father will be legally prohibited from contacting you or coming within 500 feet of you, your home or your workplace." If he violates this order, he will be subject to immediate arrest. My third call was to James Wilson, an investigative journalist who had written extensively about financial industry misconduct. We had connected last year when he interviewed me as an anonymous source for an article on gender discrimination in finance. He agreed to meet me at a small restaurant near the waterfront away from the financial district where we might be recognized. James arrived wearing jeans and a casual button-down shirt rather than his usual suit, a concession to the sensitive nature of our meeting. His eyes widened when he saw my face. "Jesus, Amanda, who did that to you?" "My father," I replied simply, "and it's related to what I want to discuss with you." Over lunch, I outlined the broader story: a successful financial services firm built on questionable practices, a family dynamic based on intimidation and control, and the physical assault that had finally broken the cycle of abuse. I explained that regulatory investigation was already underway and legal action had been initiated, but that public accountability was equally important. Financial misconduct thrives in secrecy, I explained. Clients trust advisors with their life savings, often without understanding how fees and investment strategies work. My father has exploited that trust for decades while maintaining a public image of success and propriety. James took detailed notes, asking occasional questions to clarify technical points. "This is a significant story," he said finally. "A major financial firm engaged in potentially fraudulent practices headed by a man whose public persona masks private violence. Are you prepared for what publication will mean?" "I understand the consequences," I assured him. "I can provide documentation for every allegation regarding the firm's practices. The personal aspects are harder to prove, but my injuries speak for themselves." "And you're willing to go on record, to be named?" I hesitated briefly. Initially, I'd prefer to be an unnamed source regarding the financial improprieties. The assault charges will become public record, so that part can't remain anonymous. But I'd like some time before my name is directly connected to the financial investigation. James nodded. "We can work with that approach. I'll need to verify everything independently and give your father's company an opportunity to respond before publication. That process typically takes at least 2 weeks. "That's fine," I said. "I'm not looking for immediate revenge. I want thorough, factual reporting that will stand up to the inevitable legal challenges." As we concluded our meeting, James asked one final question. "Are you sure this is what you want?" "Once this process starts, there's no going back." I touched my bruised cheek gently. "I'm sure. The time for silence is over." That evening, I checked into a different hotel under a pseudonym and turned off my phone. The 3 calls had been made. The mechanisms of accountability were in motion. For the first time in my life, I had chosen truth over family loyalty, personal integrity over social conformity. I slept for nearly 12 hours, my body releasing tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for decades. When I woke and turned my phone back on, it exploded with notifications. 27 missed calls from my mother. 15 from Justin. 5 from my father himself, despite the restraining order that had presumably been served. There were also dozens of text messages ranging from pleading to threatening. "Amanda, call immediately. Your father is furious. This is a family matter that needs to be handled privately." My mother: "What the hell did you do? Dad was just visited by a sheriff. Fix this now." Justin: "You've made a serious mistake. Call me before this gets worse for you." My father. I forwarded the messages to Diana as evidence of attempted contact, then checked the news. Nothing public yet, but it was only a matter of time. I had set 3 separate processes in motion, and now all I could do was wait for them to unfold. 1 week passed, then 2. I took a leave of absence from work, explaining to my new employers at Blackwood Financial that a family emergency required my attention. They were surprisingly supportive, even extending my start date by a month with no questions asked. I moved from hotel to hotel every few days, a precaution Diana had suggested given my father's resources and potential desperation. On the 10th day, the first headline appeared: "Financial services firm under investigation for alleged client fee manipulation." The article didn't name me as the source, but it detailed multiple instances of questionable practices at Gordon Financial Services. My father issued an immediate statement calling the allegations baseless attacks from competitors and promising full cooperation with any investigation. 3 days later, a more damaging story broke. Gordon Financial CEO faces assault charges in domestic incident. This article included public court records of the restraining order and criminal complaint. Though details were sparse due to privacy protections in domestic violence cases, the story confirmed that Richard Gordon had been charged with assaulting a family member. My phone became a constant stream of messages and calls. Extended family members texted expressions of shock, concern, and in some cases anger at me for airing family laundry. Former colleagues reached out with support or curiosity, depending on their character. Even old classmates from college emerged from the woodwork seeking gossip disguised as concern. I responded to none of them, following Diana's advice to maintain complete silence during legal proceedings. The only people I communicated with were my attorney Michael from the Financial Crimes Division and occasionally James for approved updates on the investigation. By the third week, the situation had escalated dramatically. Gordon Financial's stock price had dropped 30% as clients began withdrawing funds. My father had been forced to take a temporary leave of absence as CEO while the board attempted damage control. My mother had canceled her annual charity gala, citing family health concerns. Justin called me 17 times in one day, his messages evolving from threats to desperate pleas as the reality of the situation became clear. "Do you realize what you've done?" his final voicemail demanded. "Dad's reputation is destroyed. Mom can't show her face at the club. The company is losing clients every day. All because you couldn't take a little criticism. You've ruined this family out of spite." His words revealed how completely he had internalized our father's worldview. In his mind, a punch to the face was a little criticism, and holding someone accountable for violence and financial misconduct was spite. Justin had always been our father's true protégé, not just in business acumen but in moral bankruptcy. 4 weeks after the initial calls, the full impact became clear. The regulatory investigation had expanded to include tax authorities. 3 former employees had come forward with additional evidence of misconduct after reading the initial reports. A client had filed a class action lawsuit alleging systematic overcharging and misrepresentation of investment performance. My father was arrested on multiple charges, the image of him being led away in handcuffs making national business news. My mother suffered what she described as a collapse at a charity luncheon, leading to rumors of substance abuse issues that had previously been hidden. Justin's attempts to save the company proved futile as clients continued to leave and regulatory scrutiny intensified. The board voted to suspend all executive bonuses and dividend payments, while the investigation continued, effectively cutting off my family's primary income source. Then came the moment I had been both expecting and dreading. My mother called from an unfamiliar number, bypassing my call blocking. "We know it was you," she said, without preamble, her voice brittle with rage and something else. "Fear, perhaps. The attorneys told us. You provided the evidence. You betrayed your family. Are you satisfied now that you've destroyed everything your father built?" "He destroyed it himself, Mom," I replied calmly. "Through years of questionable business practices and treating people like possessions rather than human beings. He gave you everything, a beautiful home, the best education, every advantage. Except respect, or love, or basic human dignity." She was crying now, but the tears felt manipulative rather than genuine. "What do you want, money? Is that what this is about? Your inheritance?" "I want accountability," I told her. "For the clients whose trust was violated. For the employees who were bullied and threatened. For every family dinner where I was diminished and every achievement that was dismissed. And yes, for being punched in the face, for having the audacity to build my own career." "It was one mistake," she practically screamed. "One moment of losing his temper after you deliberately provoked him. It was the culmination of a lifetime of abuse," I corrected her. And your reaction, laughing instead of helping me, told me everything I needed to know about where I stand in this family. There was a long silence before she spoke again, her voice suddenly calculating. You do realize this affects you too. The Gordon name is toxic now. Your precious new job won't want you once they connect you to this scandal. Blackwood knows everything, I informed her. I disclosed the potential conflict and the ongoing investigation before I accepted the position. Unlike Dad, I believe in transparency and ethical conduct. I could almost hear her worldview shifting, realizing for the first time that the quiet, compliant daughter had been several steps ahead all along. You planned this, she whispered. All of it. No, Mom. Dad planned it through decades of abusive behavior and questionable business practices. I just finally stopped protecting him from the consequences. After ending the call, I sat in silence for a long time, processing the strange mixture of grief and liberation I felt. The family I had desperately sought approval from was collapsing, their carefully constructed facade of success and propriety crumbling under the weight of truth. Yet amid the wreckage, I found myself standing taller, breathing easier. For the first time in my life, I had honored my own worth rather than sacrificing it for family peace. The cost was enormous, but so was the freedom on the other side of that sacrifice. 6 months passed each day, bringing both challenges and unexpected gifts. I moved to a new apartment in a secure building, changed my phone number, and gradually rebuilt my life on my own terms. My father ultimately accepted a plea deal to avoid a public trial, pleading guilty to reduced charges of misdemeanor, assault, and several financial regulatory violations. The sentence included probation, significant fines, and permanent disqualification from leading a financial services firm. The family company was sold to a larger corporation at a fraction of its former value, with most of the proceeds going to settle client lawsuits and regulatory penalties. My mother, faced with the collapse of her social standing and dramatic reduction in lifestyle, filed for divorce after 36 years of marriage. The proceedings revealed that she had been aware of at least some of the questionable business practices, but had chosen to ignore them to maintain her privileged existence. Justin struggled to find employment within the financial industry, his close association with our father's misconduct making him radioactive to reputable firms. He eventually took a position with a distant relative's insurance company in another state, a significant step down from his previous role in compensation. The extended family fractured along predictable lines. Some relatives cut contact with me, entirely viewing me as the villain who had destroyed a successful family. Others reached out privately to express support, sometimes sharing their own experiences of my father's bullying behavior over the years. My Aunt Jean, my mother's younger sister, surprised me with a long email describing how she had wanted to intervene many times over the years but had been intimidated into silence. What you did took extraordinary courage, she wrote. I wish I had found that courage decades ago. Perhaps it would have spared you years of pain. My own healing journey was neither simple nor linear. I began working with a therapist specializing in family trauma, gradually unpacking the complex layers of my upbringing. There were days of overwhelming guilt, questioning whether I had gone too far in my response to a single act of violence. There were nights of profound grief for the loving family I had always wanted, but never had. But there were also moments of unexpected joy and discovery. I formed deeper connections with friends who had stood by me throughout the ordeal. I rediscovered passions and interests that had been set aside in my endless quest for parental approval. I learned to recognize my own worth, independent of external validation. My professional life flourished at Blackwood Financial. Far from being tainted by association with the scandal, my actions in exposing financial misconduct were viewed as evidence of integrity and commitment to ethical practice. 6 months into my new role, I was asked to help develop enhanced compliance training for the entire firm. One rainy Tuesday, I received an unexpected letter with my mother's handwriting on the envelope. I almost discarded it unopened, but curiosity won out. Inside was a 5-page handwritten letter that began with recriminations but gradually shifted into something resembling reflection. I still believe you went too far, she wrote toward the end. But I've been thinking about what you said about respect and dignity. Looking back, I can see that your father and I often dismissed your achievements and priorities. That was wrong of us. I'm trying to understand how that felt to you, though it's difficult to put myself in your shoes. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was perhaps the closest thing to honest self-reflection I had ever seen from her. I didn't respond immediately, taking time to process my feelings with my therapist. Eventually, I sent a brief but cordial reply, establishing clear boundaries while leaving the door slightly open for a potentially healthier relationship in the distant future. As the one-year anniversary of that fateful family dinner approached, I realized how completely my life had transformed. The constant anxiety that had been my lifetime companion had diminished significantly. The reflexive need to minimize my achievements to avoid threatening fragile egos had faded. The desperate hunger for approval from people incapable of giving it had been replaced by genuine self-respect. The journey had been painful beyond words. There were relationships that would never be repaired, family bonds permanently severed. The costs had been real and substantial, but so were the gains: authenticity, integrity, and the freedom to exist as my full, undiminished self. In the end, I discovered that family isn't defined by blood alone, but by respect, support, and genuine care. The family I had been born into had failed those basic tests, but the family I was building through meaningful friendships and healthy connections was proving far more nurturing. The most profound lesson was perhaps the simplest: that we teach people how to treat us by what we accept, what we resist, and what consequences we establish. For 32 years, I had accepted diminishment as the price of belonging. The moment I refused to pay that price any longer was the moment I truly began to heal. If you've ever stood at a similar crossroads, weighing family loyalty against self-respect, know that there is life on the other side of that difficult choice. It may not be the life you imagined, but it might be the one where you can finally breathe. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about setting boundaries and healing from family trauma. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect in every relationship.